Fight, fight, fight!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to No Filter Gen Z. I'm here with Mariah and Elijah today. We're going to be talking about Christians and politics and where we should be in the political sphere as Christians. Like, should we be involved? What should we talk about? What should we, stay away from? There's a lot to unpack here, but I wanted to bring you guys on to talk about that today. And it's a perfect time because in the world right now, we're seeing a lot of people either say that there's this thing called Christian nationalism people talk about where it's bad to bring Christian values into the country. But at the same time, the country was founded on Christian principles. So we got to talk about both sides. And just to get started, I'll ask Mariah first. Should Christians speak politically? Should they get involved?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. There's not even an answer where I can just be like, well, I think it depends. Like, I don't even think that's a spectrum there. I think absolutely. Obviously, if they want to, like not every Christian has to speak politically.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important that we do because values are super important, morals are super important. And like what you said in the intro, this country was founded on Christian principles. So I think it's important that we can hold our grounds, hold our roots, and not shy away from that.
Yeah, and I always talk about how what politics is issues we care about and fixing things in our country that we care about to make a better, country for everybody. So, Elijah, where do you think we should like draw the line? Should we be involved in politics? And as Christians, is there like a bad side of that, or is it good for us to speak about it?
I think as Christians, it's very important to speak about politics. Like you said, it's topics that we find important, and a lot of these topics are very sadistic and not at all Christian values that we started on. So I think it's very important. I don't necessarily see where a line could be drawn, just because a lot of these topics nowadays are very, very, very Christian topics, whether it's the extreme sadistic
Mm.
area of it or it's the very high, like God wants us to be doing this kind of side of things.
Yeah,
So,
I bring that up because I don't think because Christians will say like, well, how do you know which side's supposed to be, where would Jesus be and all this stuff, and people from both sides will argue that, but I think it's really about right and wrong and not left and right because of course there's things on both sides that perspectives will play a part in, like how you perceive a certain situation or how you grew up and stuff. But there's also these other extremes, like for example, abortion. It's a child sacrifice, really, and the left has really normalized that. And to the point to the last election, it was like their main issue. So as a Christian, I look at left and right as right and wrong on these issues like that because I don't know how you could be a Christian and morally think something like that is right, but you could look at other things and see like the middle ground, I guess. But I don't know if there really is one because issues like that, it's either like good or bad. So Mariah, do you think I don't know if it's a line, but do you think that there is like right and wrong in politics?
Well, absolutely, because a lot of these issues, as of recently, especially like you mentioned with abortion and such, like that is completely right and wrong in my eyes,
Yeah.
morally. And I do have to agree. I kind of like what you said about how on both sides there's different perspectives of things.
Yeah.
And I do think like not one side is perfect whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
with their kind of views and morals. And like it's really hard because there's Republican, Democratic, left and right.
And there's
And
Christians on both sides too. So that's the thing. It's like,
yes, exactly. And also there's people who are have different views. Like for example, there are some Republicans who might support abortion. There's some
true,
Democrats
true.
who might not agree with like certain like LGBTQ in schools, stuff like that. Like people on both sides have different views like that too. So it's really hard to say, oh, one side definitely aligns more because there's so much variety.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to kind of say where one might land with that. But yeah, I think we definitely have to say like we have to draw the line somewhere and say, look, this is just plain wrong, especially like with abortion. That's just been my main thought this whole time reading about this is that's an innocent life being taken, a life that God created.
Yeah.
And so that's always been like kind of at the top of my head when I think about Christians and politics.
Yeah, and I think when we think about getting involved, it can sometimes seem divisive in politics because people will think of you in a certain way if you disagree with them, kind of. But I do think there's actually another part of that where it's worse to stand by and watch evil and not do anything about it, because in Ephesians it talks about how we're not supposed to just do that. We're supposed to expose the evil, bring it to light. And so if we don't do that, then I think we're actually missing a part of what could bring more light into the world, especially in politics, where sometimes Christians are too scared to get involved. And the thing with that is Christians should need to look at every area of life as we need Christian leaders in every area. It's not just that it's too divisive to get involved. It's that what would you be missing if a Christian wasn't stepping up and leading with biblical principles and like what Jesus would do? So, Elijah, do you think it's important that we look at it like that?
Absolutely. I mean, the Bible sets a set values to follow. That it gave us Jesus as an example of how to walk in life and how to treat others. And I think that's where a lot of conservatives do go wrong. And I'm going to point that out because I'm not going to be some one-sided kind of guy. Like we're not super charitable all the time. We like to make money and all that stuff, but we're not the most charitable people in the world. Um, and I think that needs to change, especially if we are going to call ourselves Christians and to call ourselves like followers of Christ and to be unashamed Christians. We need to step up in that aspect. Maybe not always for free, but if someone's struggling in your community, you are to help them. That's what the precedent is in the New Testament. I also think what a lot of people on the left get wrong is that the wall is very biblical. Keeping your border safe is very biblical. Just look at Nehemiah. I mean, so they get that wrong. So like you said, there's a balance on both sides to where there are some things that one side gets right, where the other side gets wrong, and vice versa. But we are to find the side that makes the most sense and aligns the most with Christian values and make it that. So I do find that very important.
Yeah, and when you said that, it made me think of the left. Like, of course, we're humans and never going to be perfect. Everyone's going to have something that they're not right on, even if they think they are. But on the left, what they do, like what liberals do more often, I think, is validate sin kind of thing. Like where they say like, yeah, it's you should be thinking that, like, good for you and all these things, when it's actually harmful to them. And to where as Christians, when I see that, I'm like, I think it's more loving to call someone out of their sin than to validate it and actually lead them into it. And so, yes, where conservatives need to be more loving in that way, but liberals need to be a little bit on the other side, because there could be a dangerous part where we get comfortable in our sin and we're really not doing anything about it. Whereas like God calls us out of it and not to just stay in it. So Mariah, have you seen anything like that go on and on either side, or what do you think about the whole issue with sin and I guess political spheres?
Yeah, just calling people out. I agree. I think one thing that came to my mind as soon as we started talking about that is kind of affirming, like gender affirming surgery, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Like, oh, you know what? If you feel that way, you're definitely a boy. You're definitely a girl. You're not what you're supposed to be. You should try doing like stuff like that. I have seen a lot on the extreme side of the left and the liberal community. I mean, not everyone, like I said, there's a huge balance, and some people who lean that way don't agree with that. So like it's really hard again to categorize, but
yeah,
that is something obviously that we mainly see over there. I do think still it's important to call people out on their sin. And you know what? I have to hold conservatives accountable too, because I've seen a lot of conservative movements just spreading hate as well, being
yeah.
very extreme about like um, hating on the other side and being very like not accepting and loving. Like
Hmm.
we have to have grace and truth, like we talked about in one of our previous episodes. So if we're not presenting ourselves with grace either, and we're being extremely hateful, and um, that's not good as well. So we all have to kind of collectively realize where we're falling short in our sin, because all have fallen short.
Yep.
And so that's one thing that comes to my mind.
That's good. And I think it's going to be unpopular the direction we go because it's that's what Jesus calls us to, like the narrow road to life, right? So it's going to be harder, and we're going to have to um, not be loved by the world sometimes because there's certain issues where the world is going to go that way, and we know it's not the right way, and that's where it gets difficult as a Christian. It's like even when things are going on around you that aren't right, that a lot of people follow because they don't want to be the only one who doesn't. They don't want to be the black sheep, and turn the other way when really Jesus does call us to do that a lot. And one of the things that all Christians can do better is not compromising on biblical values. Like if God says something, I think we got to make sure we really put that at the forefront, because we have all
I
these
agree.
issues, and sometimes we put the Bible in the back and then we go to it later. But if we put it in the forefront, then all the issues do make a little bit more sense when we look at it from the Bible. So Elijah, do you think that like where is our generation right now in following God versus following the world? Because you see a lot of people our age lost and not knowing who they are, especially with their identity.
Yeah, I think, like we have talked about time and time again, mental illness really has taken over our society.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes even harder and harder to find God because you got one side that's telling you you're okay, you keep doing this, take your meds, and then you got the other side saying grow a pair, or you're wrong, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Um, and so we kind of have to find a healthy balance for these young people because they're young. Like I said, they don't have much life experience, and they have all these older people telling them mixed opinions about things, and neither of them are right.
Yeah, it's true. Mariah, what do you think? Same question, like about our generation. Which are we going the right way, or do we need to shift our focus, or what do you think's happening?
In the Christian community, um, I kind of am going back to what you said about not putting the Bible in the back.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a whole lot, especially like I said, if we're talking about the Christian conservative community specifically, I was reading a Bible verse in Romans about letting everyone be subject to the governing authorities,
Yeah.
even the ones we don't agree with. So even last term with Biden, we still need to remember that they have the authority right now, in our governing system. Obviously, Jesus has the ultimate authority, but
Right.
we need to still be respectful and loving. And I think even in both realms, that's something I think we can tend to stray from really quickly
Yeah.
when we disagree or when we're having a hard time. So I think it's important to hold those, just that kindness and lovingness in our hearts, something that Jesus presented all the time,
Mm-hmm.
because he was so gentle with people, even the people he disagreed with. And so I think that's something we kind of need to lean back into, is just that having grace in our heart, because
Yeah.
that is so important. And that's how we truly make an impact on people. We don't make an impact on people by yelling about what we believe, even if it's true. So we need
Yeah.
to continue to have more loving kindness.
Yeah, that's true. Especially as Christians, we know that that's what Jesus would do, and I think that the conversation that we had that you talked about with grace and truth is really where it all goes to. Because it's hard. It is hard, but you do have to have both of those as a Christian. You have to believe and stand on the truth of God while also being grace, by giving grace to other people, because we know how much God forgives us. It says to forgive your neighbor, 777 times when they forgive you seven. So it's like when God forgives you seven. So we do need
Yeah.
to keep both. And it gets harder in politics because there's such strong issues that people feel for and have emotion towards and passion towards. So Elijah, how can we do a better job at that in politics of, coming at it from a different perspective, so that to make sure we do bring grace and truth to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to just follow the example of Jesus, especially those in power. They tend to forget the authority they're under.
Yeah.
Um, and so they need to look back in the Bible and just see how Jesus walked, see the love that he had, and especially for the sinner. The saint,
Mm-hmm.
he was extremely, extremely harsh on. But the sinners, he was very loving towards. He was down by them, giving them food, really teaching them. He cared about them so much.
Yeah.
And the saint, they already know, so he holds them to a higher standard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So us as Christians need to walk in that faith where we hold our fellow Christians accountable, but we cannot hold these non-Christians to the same accountability. They don't have the same one.
Yes.
And so how are we to hold them to the same standard that we hold ourselves because they have a completely different view on the world? And that's not even a bad thing. That's just how God created us. We all have different minds.
Yeah, and if they don't know God, then it's going to be harder. It's not going to make the same sense that it does to us. And one of the most famous lines from Jesus is he says to God, he says, "Forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they're doing." Because
Yep.
they're blind to it because they're not in relationship with God. So things look so different. I know that's true for my life. Like before I, really started living for Jesus, things looked a little different. Like even things I do now, I see it in a different way because when I was away from God, it just seemed normal. Seemed like the thing to do. It's just this is the world. But it's not like that when you know the truth and you know God. So you're good point, Elijah. That's really we got to do a better job, all of us. Mariah,
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about politics and like your own experience. Have you had any hard conversations, maybe with other people, and then have you like realized like your approach, was it the Christian way? Was it not? Like,
Mm.
have you had any experiences like that?
Honestly, I haven't talked to a bunch of people specifically about this stuff because I think a lot of the people I am surrounded by are similar in view and similar in mindset. But as I've had conversations even with those people, I definitely think I've realized that just presenting yourself is more important than anything, even if like they have some abuse to you. Because I don't want to come across as like, wow, I
Yeah,
can't believe you think like that, or that's stupid. I want to be able to see things open-mindedly while holding my values
yeah,
because you can't do that. There's a way to listen and still disagree and not come across as like closed off.
yeah,
Because, I think I was always worried in the past, like if I didn't have my defenses up, that I was going to start like crumbling and falling down. But you can listen and still hold the truth like in your heart. There is a way
yeah,
to do that. So I think for me, that's one of the most important things is just learning that I can listen with an open heart and an open mind. And maybe I will come out of that conversation differently, like in one way or another, but it doesn't mean I have to allow that to like completely penetrate me. You know what I mean?
yeah. Something that changed my perspective a lot is just in real life. Like, just take this situation for example. Is you go to a fast food restaurant, you go pull up to the window, and the person gives you a mean look, and they're just rude, and then you leave thinking, "What the heck? What's wrong with that? What's their problem?" But
Yeah.
but you have to start thinking, well, I don't know what they're going through right now. Like we all have different things we go through, and it's so easy to just like, lash out and be like, what the heck are they doing? When we
Hmm.
don't know their own experiences, like what they could be doing. They might have just lost someone, or something might be going on where they really need Jesus. And if we come at a certain way, we might be pushing them away as a Christian. If they know we're a Christian and we react a certain way, they get a bad look at all of it. And of
Yeah, we
course,
have to be very careful.
yeah, and of course, humans, like we're gonna make mistakes, but we should be more intentional about, like you said, listening, and also leading them to Jesus instead of pushing them away, because it's easy to do that. It's easy to do the opposite of that. So, same question to you, Elijah. Have you had any experiences with conversations or anything that have given you an outlook at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back, especially, I obviously come from a more democratic state, Buffalo, New York.
Mm,
And so a lot of people, maybe not in my community, because I live in a small farm town, pretty conservative area, but once you go to like the city or the village of East Aurora, which is really close to there, there tends to be a lot more liberal democratic people. And I went to school really close to there. And at that time, I was a raging conservative. I was hyper, you have to believe in this or you're wrong. And I just like completely not a Christian view on it. And it's just proof that like as a 16-year-old boy, like you shouldn't vote. You shouldn't have that influence because like you're just so emotional about it.
mm,
And you got to think rationally and you got to think like Jesus. So a lot of my debates were pretty hyper emotional, very like that. And as a man, that's not very looking back, I'm not very proud of that.
Yeah. It's hindsight's 2020 though. Like in the moment,
Yeah.
you might not even realize how your approach is, and then later you learn from it. And that's life in general. You learn from everything. I had a conversation with an atheist on my podcast a few weeks ago, and the big takeaway at the end was I talked about my perspective a lot, and he took some things away, and I actually learned from him a little bit. And at the end, we talked about how we can disagree and still have a good conversation. And I think that's what we're missing from politics today. Is people can't even have a conversation
Yeah,
without hating the other side. There's so many
yeah,
liberals that think that everyone who supports Trump is just an evil person. There's so many Republicans that think that the people that voted for Kamala are evil people. Like there's just so much division where I think it's polarization, where it's so opposite that people are just they just take the rage out on the whole group. When Mariah, like you said, is people might disagree on certain issues even in the party. So we
hmm
can't just take one look at everybody and think that they're all the same and they're all evil, either side. What's
yeah.
one, I guess, what's one way that we should move forward with politics as Christians? How can we change that environment of like toxicity and just rage?
Well,
It's hard.
I definitely what?
It's hard.
Oh, yeah, no, it is seriously so hard. I think obviously first and foremost we have to be that example because other people are going to be looking around regardless of like who has the influence. People are going to look around to see how other people act.
Yeah.
That's in literally any situation in life. People look at other people. People look at what other people do, how people act, how people treat situations. And there's so much like extreme rage going on everywhere, just like you mentioned. So I think for us as Christian conservatives, it is so important to be that example of, hey, we can do it this way instead.
Mm.
Because people will look to that and people will look at the result. It's not
Yeah.
just about what we do, it's about the results. And if people can start to see that you can have genuine good conversation like us as humans were meant to do in the first place,
Yep.
then I think that they will want to follow naturally, not even just because of how we're doing it.
Yeah, it's good. And I think that getting back to reading like how Jesus handled certain situations is a great way. Just reading the
Yeah.
Bible more to see how Jesus interacted with sinners and interacted with people that didn't disagree with or that didn't agree with him, like the Pharisees and all these influences. I think when we're looking for a solution, one of the ones is right there in the book. It's just looking at the example of Jesus and what he
Yeah.
did. Elijah, what do you think about how we can move forward from that kind of environment?
I think, yeah, especially looking back on the Bible, I mean, the way Jesus held himself, it's just much higher than any of us could imagine, and nobody's going to come close to how he walked. Obviously, he was quite literally perfect,
Yeah.
um, but it's a perfect representation of what we need to be. And so, if we're not looking at that, then we're not going to be walking in grace and in love and in truth. We're going to be walking in some sort of denial of what we need to be
hmm And as Christians, if you look at a conversation that you had and you're left leaving like that's not what Jesus would have done, then yeah, it's a learning situation, but it's also like you got to do better because Christians, we are the light of the world. We're the salt and the light that are going to bring people to Jesus. So we have to be better. And I mean, I don't want anyone to feel like that they're bad for getting involved in politics. Like I think it's a good thing that we're actually bringing the conversations and kind of trying to lower the heat a little bit because we know that's what Jesus would do. So it kind of helps to bring them into this instead of being scared and saying like, oh, people are going to not like me and Christians like we can't be that divisive. Well, no, it's good to have conversations. I guarantee you that the disciples didn't agree on every single issue. Like
Yeah.
they were looking up to Jesus, but they didn't agree with each other on everything. I guarantee it. If you look at all four gospels, I mean, they had different perspectives on things, and that's why the writing is a little bit different. We're people, we have different minds and stuff, and that's awesome that God gave us that ability. So it's really cool, but it's it's definitely a learning experience.
Yeah. I
I think
agree.
we should end on one more issue. Like we talked about abortion a little bit, but one issue that I actually got to debate Charlie Kirk on at this cool thing we all went to is the death penalty and being a Christian. So I want to just ask you guys for the last few minutes we're on here, what's your opinion on the death penalty as a Christian? Because my perspective and what I said to Charlie Kirk was, I understand that it's not a moral equivalency to an unborn child, but being pro-life is being pro-life. And I think God is the ultimate judge, and he should have the final say on anybody. Paul killed Christians and then wrote 13 books in the New Testament, so anybody can be changed by Jesus. What is your guys' thoughts on the death penalty? Is it right? Is it wrong? And as Christians, what should our view be, Elijah?
Well, I am very closely aligned with Charlie on this opinion, and I'll tell you why. In the Bible, time and time again, New and Old Testament, God has placed a government over our people to judge. Just because you're forgiven by God doesn't mean you shouldn't be punished. And yes, God's going to punish you on Judgment Day, but there will be an earthly punishment just the same because we have a government to help keep us safe. And time again, there was stonings, there was just beheadings, stuff like that. And even throughout history, I mean, this is not anything new. This is actually a very nuanced thing to not kill people for heinous crimes. This is a very common thing throughout history. So I believe that it is biblical to actually punish these people in that kind of a way. I'm also filled with grace and love, of course. But when you take a life, Hammurabi Code comes from the Bible, actually. An eye for an eye comes from the Bible, and people forget that.
And that's what Charlie Kirk said too. He said that the first 5 books, the Torah, they all say that same thing. But my thought on that is that Jesus came and said that you've heard that it's an eye for an eye, but I say, that turn the other cheek when your neighbor slaps you or whatever. So, or when your enemy slaps you. So that's where I kind of differ on that, because I feel like Jesus kind of fulfilled that and changed because it's the loving way to do. And yeah, I agree with punishment, but I think there's a way we can do it without ending their life, because I think maybe God's not done with their life yet, you know?
Maybe, but a lot of these people, I feel like, tend to have a certain part of their brain that just doesn't function the same way ours does. And if you look at people like Jeffrey Dahmer and people like that, they literally openly say, if I'm not in jail, I will do it again.
I believe we should keep them in jail. I just don't know about killing them, because like what if they're in their jail cell and that's where they find Jesus? Because churches broadcast to jails and they go and speak to them. So I don't know. That's where I differ. But hey, true. we can agree to disagree, but I want to hear Mariah's perspective on this.
So this is actually I'm kind of torn on this, because on one hand, I agree, like, God is the ultimate judge and he's the one who kind of decides the stuff, but at the same time, like, he's also given the governing authorities their position.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, there's so many sides. I do have to say, like, you're right, their life could be changed in that jail cell, because I've seen that happen. I've heard about that happening. But then that's also where our tax dollars are going to, feeding them and keeping them clothed and stuff like that. And there's so many people who, it's really unfortunate how many people do take other people's lives. Like, it's crazy to me that this is even such a big issue. I feel like this should only be like, oh yeah, like, we've only had to do the death penalty once or twice a year. I wish, but I don't know. I mean, to be honest, knowing that God gives the government authorities like this position, I kind of say, like, okay, I'm gonna submit to that because that's a biblical thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think we should obviously fight against that. It's
Look,
so complicated.
I hear you too. I think that's a good point as well. And I think what we just did was show that you can have conversations, disagree, and still be civil, because like that's kind of what we've been talking about the whole time. We're Christians. We can talk about this, have different views, and still talk about it. It's been lost. But I want to know what you guys watching think about this issue. Like, comment below. I want to hear other people's perspectives. Maybe you're a Christian, maybe you're not. Like, what do you think about the death penalty and being pro-life and your perspective on that? But thank you guys for joining me on this episode. That was a fun conversation. We'll have to revisit this in the future and kind of see where we're at in the future. But Mariah, Elijah, great conversation. Thank you. Click that subscribe button if you're new to the channel, guys, and we'll see you next week. Peace.